a lot of recent, to John Jay College also, sociologist. And, trial and demonstration that occurred back doing a show called Rebbe. Everything okay? Oh, don't be. That's okay. Anyway, and then out of that, I've been doing the last couple of years or so a show on Manhattan Neighborhood Network called The Radical Imagination. And again, since I'm a sociologist, I sort of quasi-borrowed the term from C. Wright Mills, who wrote a famous book back in the mid-50s called The Sociological Imagination. It's about basically having people on who are seeking alternative narratives to issues and structures that are basically broken. So we've had a tremendous diversity of people on. And over again now, it's become clear that this has become more and more of an important vehicle for people. You just can't get the sort of people on our show and then the shows that the panelists are doing here on the corporate media. Hi. So why don't
and kind of writing for a few sites. I was introduced to Cenk Uygur, the founder of the Young Turks. We started talking. I basically was like pleading, you know, I'm a fuck the echo chamber guy, and I'm stuck in this echo chamber. And it was just, you know, luck or dumb luck or timing, but the Young Turks had wanted to get somebody out in the field for the campaign. So, like, he told me that, oh, yeah, in a few years, you know, we want to do reporting. And then, like, a month later, he called me and was like, you want to go cover this debate tomorrow in New Hampshire? So from there, I covered the campaign for them. And also, besides just covering the primaries, things like that, I tried to really hone in on the primary states. So like I'd go to Indiana a few days early or New Hampshire a few days early and cover the local stories that the media doesn't touch. And after the campaign, I was in Standing Rock many times. I've been to Flint many times. East Chicago, Indiana has a lead crisis. I've been there. And I took a tour last year covering what I like to call the disappearing middle class. So Pennsylvania, Michigan, Ohio, Wisconsin, Illinois. And separate from TYT, a couple months ago I launched my own media company called Truth Against the Machine. So I have about 10 to 20 reporters that are exclusively focused on local and state corruption because we're a Trump-free zone for the most part. And really covering those issues that everyone else is ignoring.
I'm Tabitha Wallace. I'm the co-host of a show called Watching the Hawks, a daily political talk show that is on RT. Dun, dun, dun. The evil Russian agenda. I spent most of the election, you know, talking about Bernie and being critical of everybody, but apparently that was, you know, helping Trump get elected. I had no idea what I was doing. But anyway, all the power I had no idea. If I had known. I moved to New York in 1999, and a couple of years later, right after 9/11, which I was there for, I got a job as Fareed Zakaria's second assistant at Newsweek. 2002 was an eye-opening experience, I will say that, of working for a corporate media during what was, you know, the war in Afghanistan, you know, the Church of the Nativity, and I'm watching things happen, and I'm watching a room full of people try to decide whether, you know, the story about two teenage suicide bombers was the cover or the fact that Pamela Anderson got hepatitis. It was a 90-minute debate, editorial debate, hand to God. And that was when I was like, I just don't think this is right for me, maybe right now in my life, because I was going to burn something down if I stayed there too long. So I went on to actually move into the movie business, just so much less corrupt. And I worked in movie marketing, which was figuring out how to get people to go see bad movies, and I was really good at it. And then 2008 came, and they didn't stop making bad movies. They just stopped paying so much to get people to go see them for a while. So that kind of changed everything, and I went back to working on, you know, my art and writing and doing filmmaking, which that's how Tyrell and I sort of ended up working together. Is kind of realizing that we came from different backgrounds, but that we had this way of being, we could argue for hours, but it was so productive. We were having dialogues. And I grew up in a town of 1,200 people in Wisconsin, where I was born, where like 99% of my family is there. I'm the weird one. I'm the one weird one. Literally the most famous person in my hometown. It's pretty exciting that way. But seeing what happened to this little town of 1,200 people and the towns surrounding it, and seeing what happened, and especially this election, it sort of made everything that we do so much more important, because I watched the people that I grew up and around and loved and have worked so hard and just gotten screwed by the system left and right since ever. And I just realized that no one was talking for them. And that went across the board. It was people my age who lived in LA, who worked really hard, who went to school, who did all the right things, who did everything right. We did what we were told we were supposed to do by the establishment. And we all ended up with empty pockets and being told we were terrible and we're awful. And the same thing has happened to those people back home in a slightly different way, is that I'm watching these people who just want to feed their kids and want their kids to be able to have a better life. And they're just a punching bag. All of us are sort of just this punching bag for corporate media, because if it makes them money, they'll do it. They'll throw you under the bus. And I think that's what I do, is try to talk for those people that get thrown under the bus by the corporate media. Because they will seriously have a 90-minute conversation about whether it should be Pamela Anderson getting hepatitis or 2 teenage girls who were suicide bombers during the first rage into Afghanistan. That's kind of your point where you just go,
Well, today,
we shouldn't allow that.
today, if Trump didn't give it to her, they wouldn't cover it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
There you go.
Okay, my name is Tyrell Ventura. I grew up in Minneapolis. I have a kind of a known father named Jesse Ventura, who was governor, an independent governor for from 98 to 99 to 2002. I grew up wanting to be a filmmaker and get into the movie business and be a writer and a director. And you know, when you have a very politically active father and someone who kind of, you know, questions the status quo and questions the establishment and questions the story that we're all told, that gets filtered down. And you know, my first realization, as weird as because I was a movie buff, my first realization that something wasn't quite right with the system was when he took me to see the movie JFK at like 11 years old. And I realized that, oh, wars are fought for money, and presidents are killed for money, and leaders are killed for money, and that's how the system works. And then, of course, you get into history class in high school and grade school, and that doesn't go over well, and you start questioning your history books. But then I graduated, and he became, you know, I graduated high school, he became governor. I pursued my career in filmmaking. I worked for a short period of time with another controversial figure. I guess I was kind of bred for this. I don't know. I worked for Sean Penn right around the time he was going to Iraq, before everybody, you know, to actually, you know, before any media really wanted to go and talk about, you know, the reality of the situation there, which is sad that we have to rely on actors to do that for us today. And then I worked for MSNBC. My father got out of office. Everybody wanted him on their channel, on their cable news channel. You know, ooh, Jesse Ventura, you know, politician, wrestler, this guy can talk. So I worked as a producer on the MSNBC show, which is where I suddenly became aware of the fact that basically at the start of every day you're given, I don't know if this was true for you or if you saw this, but we saw this at MSNBC, and back then that was right in the lead up to the Iraq War. This is about 2003, 2004, when everybody was geared up to go to Iraq, and I think Donahue was on there, who was against the Iraq War. He lost his job. My father was against the Iraq War. They didn't know that when they made the deal with him. When they found out, it came down from up on high. They're like, well, can we change his mind? What they asked. And you know, I think we all said, no, I don't think you're going to change Jesse's mind on not wanting to go into Iraq. Then things got really rocky at MSNBC when they found out that he wouldn't cheerlead the war. And then obviously Donahue was let go. Ashley Bansfield was let go. A lot of people were let go who, you know, basically didn't want to go to war. And waste a lot of money and lives. At that time also, I learned at MSNBC, like I said, I don't know if this is true for your time at Fox or there, that you would get every day in your inbox, you would get the 5 to 7 major stories that you would talk about that day, and for your hour or half-hour long show, and you couldn't deviate from those stories. Now the host could kind of put their spin on them, but you couldn't go out and get like, no, we want to talk about this. And at the time, it was during the Kobe Bryant, Colorado rape case, and my father's like, well, I mean, I'll talk about it for it. We all were like, we'll talk about it for maybe a day, because it's an important part of culture, not the act of what, not Kobe, but rape culture, and that is a good topic to talk about on television and get out there, but not for 5 straight days, because what more? I mean, there's a certain point where it's just salacious. Then there's a certain point across that line. But that was the orders from up on high, and that's why when you watch most mainstream media, every channel generally talks about the same thing. It's these 5 to 7 stories that are picked. And when you'd ask the higher-ups back in New York, because we were lucky enough to put the show together in Minneapolis, why these 5, 7 stories, where did these come from? No one could tell you.
Did they break it up with one of the Pamela Anderson stories, maybe? No.
Probably.
During the
Because we had the
no,
same
no,
thing at
that's-
Newsweek. We had the
Same,
same
yeah.
thing at Newsweek. Back in the 2000s, we had the same thing at Newsweek. There was a list, and it was the same thing.
That was
5 or 6
really-
stories. I think it was 10
Wow.
for us, but these had to be in the magazine no matter what.
So long story short, I worked also with my father on a show called Conspiracy Theory, where we went around the country investigating conspiracy theories, and I met a lot of interesting people. Yes.
Any facts, conspiracy facts?
A lot of conspiracy facts, but we also worked to, we also worked to try to convince people that no, reptilians weren't running the world. We also tried to get some common sense into that world as well too, because you need people out there questioning, but at the same time, there's a very fine line where the questioning, and I understand the paranoia can kind of take you over an edge, and then suddenly you're over here. But we did that, and then out of that show, I met Sean Stone, Oliver Stone's son. I just met Tabitha, and we were doing some producing on like narrative fiction movies and series. And then we got opportunity to do a show called Buzzsaw, which was an online news show that came out of conspiracy theory, because they said, hey, you and Sean have, you and Sean are kind of fun. And I said, Tabitha, you should produce it. And then I went up there and tried to do on-air stuff by myself, which I can't stand being on camera. And they said, you need a co-host because you're terrible alone. And then Tabitha thankfully had a background that allowed her to do that. So that show then essentially RT saw what we were doing online, and I went out and had a meeting with them in DC, and they said, we would love for you to come and use Sean and Tabitha come do a show for us. And this was about 3 years ago, before the elections and all of that. We said yes, but on one caveat: we will not be told what we are to talk about. We will do that ourselves. We will have full creative control and journalistic control of the show. And they said, that's our standard operating procedure. It's in your contract. You have nothing to worry about on that front. And so we created Watching the Hawks, and have been going on, going strong ever since. I think the general idea of our show is to bring voice to the voiceless. What I want to do is, I don't consider myself a journalist. I consider myself a conduit for good journalism. I'll go out and find really great stories that people do, and I'll try to present them to as many eyeballs as possible, because ultimately I don't want to make you think like me. I just want to make you think. And that's what the important thing I think that's lacking in mainstream media today. So that's me.
Interesting. Yeah. So there's no editorializing in your work?
No, I do editorializing. I'll
More an
comment and we'll
opinion
talk
show.
about
Yeah.
it. And it's an opinion and analysis show,
Right.
but we try to present it in a way that, you can listen to us and you can disagree with us and all that. I'm not trying to convince you to see it my way by the end. It's just my opinion. It's her opinion. It's Sean Stone's opinion. Maybe you agree, maybe you don't.
We kind of feel like it's boring to watch people who agree sit and talk about how brilliant they both are.
Right.
And to me, or gang up on the other person that they all think. And to me, that's what CNN and MSNBC and Fox News have become. It's an echo chamber, and then you throw, raw meat in the middle and see what happens. And I don't want to talk to just people who I fundamentally agree with. I want to talk to people who don't and have a dialogue.
Plus, I found, too, that in order to get people to really think about something, it's easy to kind of stand on a soapbox and yell and holler at them, but I've always found that the more times in my life that I've been, touched by a news story or a new way of thinking or a new political ideology or something like that, has usually come from a conversation I've had at a bar or around a dinner table or hanging out with my friends or meeting new people. And so that's the point of like having kind of an opinion and a conversation about it, because you hope in that conversation that those at home would be like, oh, that's an interesting point.
Connecting. And,
it's easier to change someone's mind through a conversation than hitting them in the head with a brick.
But it's got to be entertaining.
Yeah.
And to be fair about it, I mean, your father was certainly not bashful about entertainment. He understood that, right?
Entertainment's part of the job, and anyone who tells you otherwise is loony now. Because
Absolutely.
Look, we have to compete with The Walking Dead and Game of Thrones.
There you go.
Yeah.
We're never going to compete with Game of Thrones. It's never going to happen.
Washington is,
Do you consider yourself a journalist? I mean, with that, you do. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I've been shot at, so I hope so.
Okay.
I think that's the automatic.
Yeah.
All right. You've been shot at, threatened.
But honestly, to me, I think the reason independent media has been thriving is because we don't try and entertain.
Yeah.
I think the one common theme I get from viewers is that they feel like I'm not very different off camera than I am on camera.
Right.
So I mean, my cameraman back there, Ty, and I were doing a video yesterday in my apartment. I mean, it doesn't really look like 60 Minutes, like we dropped the camera or like somebody pressed the buzzer to come in, and people really like authenticity rather than you could have a very nice looking polished set and swishy graphics. Fox News really, when they were marching for Iraq, same thing with CNN, MSNBC, they had the swoosh and all this stuff, but it's robots and fakes. So I think whether it's TYT or Kyle Kalinske, Lee Camp, RT, I think people are attracted to people, not like them ideologically, but people that they feel like are on the same wavelength in experience. Yep. And I think that's the main reason independent media is thriving, particularly amongst young people. Yeah.
And that's important to say. It's thriving. People are really turning to this. So the title of this program here is Breaking the Stranglehold. So are you doing that? I'm not, again, making reference a little bit to your father's ex-profession there, but are you breaking the stranglehold? Do you feel that you're doing that?
Yeah, I mean,
or beginning to start to do that?
Yeah, to me,
show an alternative way of.
See, to me, I think about it a different way because I don't really give a damn about overtaking corporate media or strangling corporate media.
Right. Because
to me, my goal is to create change. My goal. For me, my journalism is activism. That's my activism. So when I'm in Standing Rock, I don't hide that I want to stop this pipeline. I don't let it. I don't fudge facts. I didn't hide when I was covering the campaign. I definitely personally like Bernie Sanders. If I found out tomorrow Bernie Sanders a crook, I'd report it. That's how I am.
So you are taking a moral stand.
Yes,
right.
But to me, how I've been able to deliver change, and it's rare. But 9 out of 10 stories, you just tell the story. Maybe you get some views, but you don't get any change. But how I've been able to deliver change is by activating the audience. So like a small example, I've been covering this lead crisis in East Chicago that no one is covering. It's Flint, probably a little worse actually. And they were dumping these poor black people, poverty-stricken African Americans. They found lead levels in their soil 200 times the allowable limit. And they were basically telling them, you have 10 days to move out, and here's your address. And they were moving them to like dangerous parts of Chicago. Yeah, I'm a journalist, but that ain't right. So I put the mayor of East Chicago's number on Facebook. I told the audience, here's the information. I'm reporting you his information. I put some other elected officials on there. They were flooded. Whether that was the reason that they overturned it or not, I don't know for sure, but I know they don't like me. So to me, maybe if CNN would have picked up my story, maybe they would have mentioned it for 2 minutes, mangled it into whatever they want to mangle it into, and then moved back to Trump's tweets. So I don't really think, for my ego, it's terrific if the New York Times mentions me.
Right.
But
you
to
did
actually,
what you felt was right.
to actually deliver some semblance of change, which I think that's why people should be in this, I don't really believe it matters. We're not going to the viewership, we are going to overtake them, but these people are very disconnected, which I'm sure we'll get to, who work in corporate media, and we're not going to change their mind, just like, my father who watches Fox News, God bless him. I've stopped trying. I'm going to try to penetrate the people who are open and, you know, give them the real information.
Well, just for a couple minutes, why is there such resistance, you think, the people at the top there?
Why is there such a
Yeah,
resistance?
why is there just a hardening of...
I think
Is
it's a
it
combination of a few things. I think it's a combination of, if you're making 6 figures a year, you don't rock the boat. You don't. I mean, any normal human being, realistically, you're sitting there going like, well, if this is my career, my credibility, all of this, I'm not going to rock the boat and then have nothing, because then you have something to lose. That's the biggest way that people are controlled, is you give them things and then they have things to lose, right?
The careerism.
Yeah,
What's your
careerism. I think it's
Right.
also an echo chamber. I think there's a lot of very insulated people who don't really see outside their own bubble. You know, and when you get to those levels of corporate media that we're talking about, you're only talking to a handful. You know, you don't pierce that bubble, and when information that comes to you that could in fact pierce that bubble, you resist it, because that's, again, another natural human tendency. Ooh, I'm uncomfortable. I don't want to hear this. And you know, truth be told, I see that on all levels of media, even in independent media as well. That, you know, people are going to get insulated and they'll only talk to the people that agree with them all the time, and so, you know, you only hear one viewpoint. I think that's kind of true all the way up the line, from the top down.
Right. Well, academic world, business world.
Yeah.
I've just mentioned this in passing here, but as I mentioned before at the start, I teach at John Jay College, School of Criminal Justice. I was the only one that, again, I just wasn't my ego, just felt it was wrong. I protested, got arrested, protesting stop and frisk in New York City, but 2011. I was the only one academic in the whole damn school that did that. It's amazing. I mean, here are people who have devoted their lives to honestly trying to understand the criminal justice system. And I mean, look, I'm not anything super special or anything. You would think there'd be a couple more, right? So it's not just, it's everywhere, right?
I actually think it's cyclical, though. I mean, I can't get in their mind, but I guarantee you, majority of those people didn't do it because they didn't want to lose their jobs or health insurance. Yeah. So you have a corporate media that does not cover mass suffering. You have a corporate media that covers tweets and fake scandals and Pamela Anderson's hepatitis and all this, but doesn't go to, you know, for example, I remember in Elkhart, Indiana, before the primary, Elkhart actually had 20% unemployment after the crash. It had the highest unemployment of any county in America. The New York Times did this, you know, beautiful piece. Elkhart is back. A viewer of TYT emailed me that was not the case. So I said, you know what, I'm going to go interview this person. She's a single mother of 2. I interviewed her in a trailer park, and she said to me, I'm literally deciding right now whether to pay for my medication or buy groceries this week. You will never see that on CNN. You will never read about that in the New York Times. So if you don't awaken the masses to how bad it is, nothing's going to change. And I would suspect that a lot of people, I mean, I stayed at MSNBC longer than I wanted to because I had a health problem and I needed the insurance. So I do think that plays a part. Now, there are some brave people who say, screw it, you know, but I think one has to do with the other.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the part of the problem is that everybody is suffering from the same concerns, which is health insurance, make sure I can pay my bills and all of that. And because that's such a fundamental concern of so many people at a time in human history when it shouldn't be. Like, there's no reason, to me at least, that anyone should not have a clean place to sleep, clean clothes, water, food. There's no reason. Yeah. There's none. None. People have gold toilets. There's zero reason for anybody in this world, anybody, to go hungry and not have a place to live. And if your narrative is, well, you're a jerk. Like, you don't get it. And that's what the corporate media doesn't care, though. That's not who they're working for. Because they have a million, advertisers. They have a million people who have, favors to somebody else. And what they do, I think, a lot of times is this self-censorship, which they go, well, I'm sure Jeff Zucker knows. He knows. He must know for sure that this story is right. He must know that this whole Russia thing, or he must know that Hillary's emails, and he must know that Bernie's this. He must know that all these things are true, right? So you just go along with it because he's the guy who signed your 6-figure paycheck. Mm-hmm. And can blackball you for the whole industry.
It's I've found, I think, like a good way to describe culture in the corporate media world, and maybe it's true across corporations in general. It's very high school. Mm-hmm. It's very cliquey. It's very kind of like, it's very kind of like, well, I don't want to upset the popular kids because now I'm finally a popular kid and I don't want to get ostracized by that. Plus, you see journalists, if they go out and start reporting the truth, you see that they get blackballed from the industry and they don't get invited to the cool cocktail parties anymore. And they don't get to hang out with, the liaison, the president's agent,
Right.
And that kind of thing. So,
Very
it's
seductive.
It is very
Seductive
seductive, and
system.
people don't want to give that up.
I mean, there's also an element just of the inherent conflict of interest.
Yeah.
So journalism at its core, you're supposed to hold the powerful accountable. They're supposed to hate you.
Yeah.
That's really what it comes down to.
Now,
Yet,
who says that? I mean, what are some of your heroes?
Hunter S. Thompson, I loved.
Okay.
I do.
I.F. Stone?
Yes, modern day. I love Matt Taibbi. And I think the bottom line is, I'm writing a book about it right now, but literally, in 1996, Bill Clinton deregulated the whole industry. 6 companies, 6 multi-billion-dollar conglomerates seized control of the entire media, and what you have now is the same media that covers these trivial stories we're covering about are lobbying the federal government for subsidies, or lobbying the federal government for tax cuts. Comcast, who owns MSNBC, out in the open, their vice presidents were holding fundraisers for Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
Time Warner was literally her 10th largest donor over her career. So it's not like, in my experience, it's not like Comcast is in the editorial meeting in the morning. It's not like you're getting orders from Comcast. It's a wink and a nod. You know there's a line, and you know what line you go to and what you don't. Perfect example, just today, I happen to like getting into Twitter fights with people on TV. So Chris Cuomo of CNN, he's out covering the hurricane in Miami. And credit, he's there, and I hope he's safe and his crew. But he's saying thoughts and prayers out there. And he's also saying, this is not about left-right. So I tweeted, maybe climate change is not left and right. It's just facts and science.
Right.
So maybe instead of giving thoughts and prayers to your audience, you could explain why there was a giant storm a week and a half ago, and now this one possibly might break all the records.
Yep.
Maybe you should explain what's causing that.
And,
They
Yeah.
won't. They won't.
And I'm sorry, I gotta say, because I have a captive
about
room here.
oil.
I have a captive room here, so I just have to say it.
I'm from Texas.
I am so incredibly pissed off at my country right now. In the fact that we can, and I'm a little off topic, but in the fact, and maybe the news isn't holding anyone accountable. All you see all day long right now is hearts and minds, our thoughts and prayers and thoughts and prayers, and oh God, I hope these people are okay. I'm sorry, we can line up our fucking military and spend close to $1 trillion to invade a foreign country, and we can't airlift people out of Miami? That's ridiculous
It's
to
because
me.
God says they're not supposed to.
We have to get 5 ex-presidents together to do that?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
you know, what I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous, and a lot of that comes because you don't have a media, like you said, that actually holds political feet to fire anymore. They will in like a cutesy way. You know, Jake Tapper will challenge Donald Trump's ideas, but
Can I
he's not
interrupt you?
holding.
To be honest with you, can I interrupt
Yeah.
you? That's not what it is. What it is people are so freaking hard on religion.
Well,
And
that's part of
people are like, oh, they don't want to be like, yeah, I'm an atheist. Yeah, I don't believe what the fuck you're going to believe, what you believe in. Why? Because people will judge them. That's
So
what
how does that play into the corporate
fuck
media here?
religion. Fuck that shit. Global warming,
Okay.
climate change is happening
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah, let's.
And
By the way,
nobody want
okay.
to fucking realize it because
Go ahead, yeah.
you know what? Because
Let's
they
open it up.
worship some imaginary man in the sky. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry if
okay.
I offended anybody, but I just had to.
Joel Osteen isn't
I'll
here,
shut
so
up.
Yeah, right.
he's not opening up his. He may have agreed with you.
I have an ex-girlfriend whose grandmother was a deeply evangelical, and she claims that
yeah.
climate
Did she
change
come
was
alive
caused
after life?
by illegal Mexican immigrants.
I'm Mexican. And I was born in Texas. All my family is from Texas. My family was in Texas when it was part of Mexico. So it's like when I hear all this shit about Trump and this and that, I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? My family is here. Yeah, I don't speak Spanish, but what the fuck? Doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah.
I'm more American than...
So it's a narrative.
I am not trying to like stereotype. I just like...
Well,
We're all immigrants.
I think
Yeah.
I think
Everyone's immigrants.
Oh, yeah, no.
It's from Long Island, you
Seriously,
know,
I'm
so.
Aztec. My family's been here. My family was here
Hell yes.
before they took over Texas,
Stole
whatever.
your land, they stole it from you.
They did, they really did. But you know what?
There are no illegals on
To be
stolen
honest
land?
with you, it's actually, if they didn't steal land, where would we be? Like, you gotta think about that. Like, and people say that, but anyways, like, this is our land. Don't try to you know.
I think, unfortunately, to me, I think the religion they most focus on is money.
Yeah.
That's
Because,
the religion.
wait, but,
Religion does not fucking exist
no,
unless.
but I guess
Oh,
what I'm,
dude,
what
I
I'm
love
getting
what you're
at,
saying.
what I'm getting at is, it was always said, if Rupert Murdoch found out that he could triple his profits at Fox News by putting communists on the air, he would do it in a damn second.
Hell, yes.
Now, at Standing Rock, for example, a lot of people don't realize this, but the big reason that corporate media didn't cover it was not as much about the oil donations.
They were about money.
Morning Joe is literally sponsored by Bank of America some mornings.
Well,
You
Morning Joe
have
is fucking
Washington Post.
Chloe.
Washington Post is owned by Amazon. Amazon is heavily invested by a lot of these banks. It's all one cushy corporate. I call it a kind of an open revolving door between the banks, the lobbyists, the corporations, the politicians, and the media. It's transparently corrupt. The problem is these people on TV are supposed, what are they going to call out themselves? So, you know.
They should. To be honest with you, if I was exposed as like a selfish piece of shit, I would call myself
They don't care,
out
but
and be
they,
like,
that would sell them.
Damn.
They-
Great
Let's get over here.
Breaking the stranglehold.
Right.
Because you went straight to the people through Facebook.
Mhm.
So instead of trying to work through corporate media,
Yeah.
I think that was brilliant, you know, that you got it out there through Facebook. What are some other ways that you see us being able to support independent media to break the stranglehold that mainstream media has?
Great question.
Yeah.
Awesome
Also-
question. Love your
Also,
question.
other ways you think of to attack the structure that allows the sort of capture of the media right now in the mainstream media.
Well, I think a lot of it, for me at least, some of the things that I've done, because I had, parents who, like my dad, there's a point where you just go with God, or whatever. Like, God, the devil, whoever you're walking with, just go with them, and
Do
we
your
have to
thing,
stop, do your
right?
thing. But my mother started to, I found that there was this, it was the first Obama election, and slowly getting her to sort of look at things differently. And then she sort of realized, and my mom's a, 60-ish Midwestern woman who has lived in a town of 1,200 people her entire life and worked a job for the state. And like, my dad was a janitor, she's a secretary. She started to see it. And once she saw it, she started seeing people who were like her seeing that
That's what
change.
opened her up a little.
And that's what opens up, and it takes that one person, and then they start. And now I go home, and I have a town that's sort of, pretty mixed bag politically, sort of socialist. Well, it's Wisconsin, so we're kind of socialist anyway at heart. So it's like a little socialist and a little conservative and whatever, and a lot of independents. And I get more people in a town of 1,200 people who didn't know me when I was growing up either, stopping me and going, oh my gosh, my wife and I, and they're in their 60s and their 70s, my wife and I started watching your show. We watch it every night now. It's so much better. And it just made them realize the difference. And I think some of that is just, what if you look at something else? Because a lot of news today is like a documentarian going into a documentary and thinking they know the whole story before they've shot a single frame.
Yeah.
And that's how the news is. We know what the story is, so we're just going to go shoot that story. And that's not, I didn't go to a fancy journalism school, and I don't have a journalism degree, but I'm pretty sure you're not supposed to know the story before you investigate it.
Yep.
And that's the
Well,
backwards
treat them as
thing.
objects. You took them seriously.
Yeah.
I think one thing too about getting, what other avenues like people should embark on. I think too, it's the power. Look, no one's gonna lie. Independent media wouldn't exist today without the internet. You know, I mean, we
Oh.
wouldn't be up here if, you know, Young Turks
We have
wouldn't
to
be here.
think
We wouldn't
We
be
wouldn't
here.
be here without
You know,
the
well,
internet,
and not just Facebook, but
It's-
just, you know,
it is
and
Facebook.
these are all corporate entities that have given us this, but you can, you know, but you can even get out of that corporate realm as well and get videos and things like that. But the biggest key to it, the biggest key to breaking that stranglehold is keeping the flow of information alive. And being able to not, like I said, don't fall into the trap of becoming your own echo chamber. You know, keep yourselves open to different thoughts and different opinions and different news programs. Try to watch as much as possible and see every different angle that people are taking. It's okay to watch corporate media if you're also watching independent media, just so you know. Then you can
gotta
share
know your enemy.
and you can cross check. Because look,
You have to know
I think
why
any
they're
journalist
not.
will tell you, 5 journalists can go see a car crash. Those 5 journalists, you know, okay, the sky's blue, there were cars involved, but they're each going to put their own different perspective on that. You know, and so what you have to do as an informed citizen who cares about the news you're consuming and wants to learn and be informed and being active in this in our republic, you have to, you know, consume as much and then form your own opinion from those 5 different stories and not just focus on, oh, I'm only going to watch this group or I'm only going to watch this group, and then share it. It's a ripple effect. You gotta keep throwing pebbles in the pond.
But you know what? I hear what you're saying, but it's like, oh, you only have to watch this group and this group. But it's like, what if you don't agree with them?
That's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay.
It is very comforting sometimes
You know,
to yell at a screen and throw some popcorn at it, and
Well, I'm sorry to
It is
interrupt you, but
cathartic.
there are like lots of things that are not popular.
It's okay to
at
be uncomfortable
all.
and be
and
mad.
people are like, what?
Turn the
Wait,
channel.
And they bring them forward, and then media ignores them. They're like, yeah, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. You're just like a
You
crazy
have a question.
person.
Who had it?
So how do you combat that?
Can you not monopolize the panel, please?
Yeah, let's have a number of questions. We'll answer. You had a point.
Comment on what you just said about screaming at your television. A lot of blogs have started that way, including
All right.
Yeah.
including
There
what
you
I
go.
first did on the Glenn Beck review.
yeah. There's
Well-
a lot of it. I think that's the
Showing
thing. There is something
popcorn.
cathartic because you kind of have to know, you know, if that's the enemy, if you look at it as the person that's keeping the world from being the way you want it, then you have to know where that's coming from. And most of the time it's, you know, it's a lion with a thorn in its foot. Half the time they have one legitimate thing that you can both agree on. And the minute you open that door, even if it's psychologically, it gives them a different perspective and allows them to do that. And sometimes it's just, you can't do that with everybody. Don't get me wrong. Don't bang your head against the wall with people. Skip Thanksgiving. Do whatever you have to do to not put yourself in that emotional state. But there are people that can be talked to. And it is the thing with, I mean, my thing about how do we get past, move past the corporate media? They're out. They're out. CNN's is literally only has the numbers it has because it's on doctors' offices and airports and hospitals. That is why. Fact. They don't make that much. You look at their online numbers, you look at their actual ratings, it is a minuscule. It is like 0.01% of the population of the United States. They mean nothing. They think they're more important than they are.
I have a question.
Wait, we have a question over here.
I
We have a
learned,
question.
I learned some time ago that I'm not doing any movement or any ideal any good at all if I kick out anybody who always has a difference of opinion. I will immediately destroy any chance of being helpful in the future if I exclude them. So I have to force myself to include other opinions from other people, even if they blatantly disagree with me.
I've said many times, and I've seen it, most people, believe it or not, have compassion. Most people have no fucking idea what's going on in this country because they watch CNN and the New York Times. So, like, for example, my dad, who I love him, but he watches Fox News, and he's kind of deranged with that. When I was at Standing Rock, I didn't really have time to be sending videos all the time, but when I got home, I showed him a video of water protectors getting water shot at them in sub-zero temperatures and tear gas and all this. And obviously he didn't see that on Fox News. And he said, "What the hell is Obama doing about this?" And,
Really?
and
So
this
it did move him.
and this is someone who's
Got
very
to.
pro-police and all that. So you'd be surprised what visuals can do. Somebody else asked what we could do about it, what you could do about it. Well, everybody's got their own circumstance. You might have 3 kids and you don't have time. But if I didn't get a job at TYT, I probably would have ultimately just been like, all right, I'm going to go to the New York City Council meeting and shoot it myself. I don't care if my mother's the only one watching. Whether you're doing it to like become your own media or you're doing it just because you want to be active, you'd be surprised if you kind of carve out a niche. 9 out of 10 stories Ty and I go to, I'm the only national reporter there. There's no other national reporter. Guarantee you that half the stories you would go to in your community, there is no other media there. So you'd be surprised how quickly you could carve out a niche covering things when no one else is doing
You
it.
bring up a great point, too, that I want to share, too. If you also want to kind of cripple corporate media or at least get, better stories out there is, focus on your own communities. A lot of times it's very easy to get seduced by, federal politics and big, huge, monstrous issues. Not that they're not important and they should be focused on, but you can do more good spreading information within your own city, neighborhood, block about, and trying to make your block better than just sitting back and getting, and worrying about, the bigger issues and the bigger fights of this world. I mean, it's, being a part of this country is important. Being a part of the republic is important. Being part of a movement is important. But it starts with, hey, you know what?
Community.
There's a pothole at the end of our driveway, or at the end of our block. We should fix that.
Right.
And we should get the neighborhood to fix that. I can go out and I can find either a local journalist or whatever it may be to pay attention to this, and then maybe it gets fixed. It starts there. You're not going to get rid of the beast of corporate media or the other beasts in Washington, or the other beasts that we're fighting, banks, whatever it may be. You're not going to get rid of that. You got to cut the legs out first. You can't just fight the big fight and go after the head.
And I think the other thing, too, just quickly before I do a question, is to understand that as a fourth estate, the corporate media doesn't get to be the fourth estate anymore. They're not part of the government anymore. The fourth estate is all of us in this room, not just us, but all of you and everybody with a phone and a camera and everybody. You're now the fourth estate. You are the media. They are not. They're clowns. There's a few good ones in there that occasionally clowns. They do things, but not. They're dancing. They're dancing clowns.
And by the way, just to be clear, some of you might not like this, but we also shouldn't be absolutists. Like there are people who work for CNN that are risking their lives in foreign places. There are people for the New York Times who occasionally do good work. So like I don't like his political coverage, but Anderson Cooper thought he did a good job in Houston. I wish he would have mentioned climate change more, but at least we were seeing the images. At least they were showing the rescues. At least there was
But
there was
does
some of
Wolf
that.
ever get out of that situation room?
Wolf,
He's
no.
got to. No. All right.
You know, it hurts
Mess
me.
up his makeup.
Yeah.
Jacqueline's just joined us.
Yes, and I apologize.
What's up, Jacqueline?
I
Hold
apologize
the
so
question
much.
just for a minute. Why don't you just introduce yourself and tell us a little about yourself, and we'll take the question.
So I apologize to everyone for being
okay.
so late. I didn't realize I was actually on 2 panels. So I was sitting there eating my lunch, and someone said, "Hey, you're late for your panel." I was like, "What? I just did my panel." They're, "Oh no!" So I apologize. So I had to wipe mayonnaise off my face and stuff. So my name is Jacqueline Lukman, and I am the co-founder of Coffee, Current Events, and Politics in Lukman Nation, and also Brick by Brick in Lukman Nation. The other co-founder is my husband, Abdishahid Lukman, back there, also my producer and my silent partner. And we started Coffee, Current Events, and Politics in Lukman Nation in 2013 because we wanted to provide more exposure to local issues that we knew were going on in our community in Southeast Washington, D.C., and in the black community in general that was never covered by the media. We would always hear in media outlets about how the black community doesn't do this and the black community isn't concerned about that, and why aren't black people protesting violence in their neighborhoods? And we see vigils and protests and marches and churches and people doing stuff to help people in our communities, and we've seen it all our lives, and we realized as much of political junkies that we have always been, that our story just wasn't getting told. And a lot of times, even in a lot of what was left of the black media, not just the regular television and the cable media, but what's left of the black print media, which there isn't a lot anymore, it's because outlets are corporate funded, if they are, those stories still aren't told. So you have these small papers like our friends in Richmond, Virginia, from the Virginia Defender.
Black Agenda Report?
Black Agenda Report.
Right.
And they are subscriber funded. They are very small, and they're able to tell stories that only people who are in their small area will ever see. And we thought, we like to travel. We like to hop in our car and go to these cities and meet these people because we love meeting people and hearing their stories. Why don't we tell these people's stories? Why don't we expose at least people in the online world to issues that maybe they wouldn't hear about if we didn't tell it? And so we started Coffee, Current Events, and Politics in Luke Mon Nation with that premise, and looking at the national stories and talking about it from a predominantly black perspective also. And then, of course, Bernie Sanders happened. And then it kind of took on another life, and we were able to give voice to the black progressive perspective in spaces where it kind of didn't exist. And it's gotten better, but it's still a struggle. It's still a struggle because the panel I just did earlier, even in online media, in online progressive spaces, people just don't want to hear black voices unless we're amplifying what the popular theme is. So that's
Terrific.
Well, I also I think coming from that, at the beginning I mentioned I started my own company, and it's basically local and state corruption and justice, some of the things you're speaking about, because people are starving at the local level for people to pay attention to their issues, because the politicians certainly aren't. But one thing I really think is it's not just important to have diversity in terms of skin color, sexual orientation, these things. I would love to see more African Americans across cable, but income level. Like, honestly, how could somebody making $6 million a year report on poverty accurately?
Exactly.
I personally, I've had, maybe it seems like nothing to you guys, when I have been offered first class tickets, I don't take them. Because like, if I start taking first class, it's a human thing. You start getting comfortable and you forget what people are going through. So it's like when I watch MSNBC or even the New York Times, these columnists, or Morning Joe when I want to really cut myself, you know, these people are the cocktail crowd. They are completely disconnected from reality, and that's why they all sat on November 8th stunned. How did this happen? Because they didn't know how frustrated and miserable the majority of the country are. Yes, there were definitely racists who voted for Trump, but I met many of them that if I asked them, if not Trump, who are you going to vote for? Bernie Sanders. So I think that we need to have some more people reflective of average working people doing journalism, not people. It's nice in any career to make a lot of money, but we need to have people that can report from personal experience rather than having pundits on to bloviate about nonsense.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was good.
I think there were three. Did you have you had your hand up? Okay, go. All right, go ahead. Go ahead. All right.
My mom was in Europe in 2006. There was a bumper sticker that said CNN Live. That was a long time. And it was Amber Lynn. But my point is, I heard about NewsBud or Sibel Edmonds, who, as you know, only founded her news organization because she was disgusted with Amy Goodman, Democracy Now!, which has become completely co-opted. What do you think of Sibel Edmonds as a great source of independent, accurate news reporting? NewsBud.
I legitimately don't know her. Never heard her.
Whistleblower of the century, remember? Yeah, gagged twice by.
I don't believe I've met her, but I've read NewsBud and I've read that, and I think that, look, if you know, I don't necessarily, like I was saying earlier, you want to get news from as many different places as possible, and then compare it to the news you get from other places, and then somewhere in the middle you'll probably get to the truth of what the story is. You know, so I don't think it's, you know, we have to be careful that we don't just constantly pit everybody against everybody. You know, because, you know, yeah, you know that there's the people out there that are in it for a buck, or you know the people out there that are in it just for the clicks, and you know, those people are going to say whatever they want to say.
So how do you determine that?
You know,
like, there's always two sides to the story.
but
So how do you
what I'm
determine
saying, well, what I try to do when I'm looking at a story is I'll try to find the 3 or 4 stories from 3 different, you know, 4 sources, and then I'll say, okay, you know,
here's what this person said, here's what this person said, here's what
if
they
the
kind of
sources
agreed
aren't
on.
reliable? How do you base that
Well,
off?
but then you're getting to a point where it's like we could argue about whether the sky is blue or gray. I mean, that's really you follow my logic there. I mean, at a certain point, you just have to say, I have to get as much information as possible. Yes, I might not get the full story, and that might change tomorrow, and then you have to leave yourself open to that
How do
change.
you know the information you get is valid? Because with
Research.
so much
Research.
stuff,
Research.
with everything that's going,
We've
yes,
got a
there
couple
is
of people on this
research.
side they've been holding their hands.
Can I just say one thing?
Okay, real quick.
Real
and then
quick.
We got to get. We'll get you. I
Yeah, real
promise.
quick. To that, I just got to be honest. I've seen a very, I think, troubling trend on the left, actually, of attacking whether it's TYT or Democracy Now! Or whatever. If you want to be critical of people's coverage, that's fine. But to me, actions speak louder than words.
Yeah.
So, like, if you don't like TYT or Democracy Now! Or whatever, they're not up to your progressive standard. That's fine. But I mean, TYT is the one who sent me to cover all these things. You know, Amy Goodman was there when dogs were chomping on human flesh.
Yeah.
So if your standard is frankly absolutism, if your standard is if the media, if your preferred media isn't foaming at the mouth as angry as you, then you're going to have a very lonely room, whether it's politicians or media. So
Is that why
Our
they-
start
Wait,
your other.
wait.
We've got to get other
yeah.
people. Lou.
So
Okay.
I'd say, judge your media or your politicians based on actions, not if they agree with everything you agree with.
Okay. Yes. And
That's your point.
okay. Go, and you're next. Absolutely.
I was just gonna say, like you were saying, CNN has barely any viewers, and like your parents watch Fox, but like a lot of the younger generations, like do they even watch cable and like corporate news? Like, so are we?
No.
What are we? How do we have to dismantle them, or are they just
No.
gonna fade away?
They're on their way
Dismantle
out.
themselves.
That's a very good
It's
observation.
kind of how
Go by
I feel
their
about
own.
it.
So like,
Yeah.
Okay. This young man now. Yes. I'm sorry.
You know,
Well, you avoided her question?
it's, when Jimmy Dore talked about gaslighting, it really struck a chord with me because all my life, I mean, and when I was in high school, and I'm 63 now, but when I was in high school, in 1971, I was a junior in high school, and I went on the south side of Chicago, a Catholic high school, and at the time, they had a coach, but they gave him a job as a social studies and justified, having a seat there in the high school. And he was a good guy, but I didn't think he was the sharpest stick. But anyway, he had the social studies, and I of all the classes that I remember in high school, I remember that one because he let the kids. And guess what? The talk was about you had the conservative kids or the liberal kids and the conservative kids, And I'd say, well, there's no such thing as liberal and conservative. But anyway, get to the point that we had a science teacher in the high school, and he was a Palestinian, and he was a visiting scholar, whatever, teaching at the high school and he was one of our guest speakers because he had an open floor for the, it was in the class, in the social studies class. And he gave a talk about, and now this is 1971, he talked about his experience as a Palestinian in Israel, and it wasn't,
So it was a valuable experience.
But it wasn't a good story.
Right.
And he was saying about what's going on, and you just don't know it. And he was going to have a conversation on television. He says, no, it was like the U.S. Chef. It was one of them. It wasn't ABC or CBS, but it was, say, the predecessor to what Fox started, But anyway.
Right. Yeah.
And he says, now, we're going to have a debate with this rabbi, and he's going to have the Israeli point of view, and I'm going to have my point. He says, I'll be surprised if I last long in the conversation.
Well,
high school.
They're welcome on Radical Imagination. That's what we do.
What was wrong with the TV set for the station?
Right.
And we come back the next day, and he came into the room. He says, "Well, you live in a free country, don't you?" So I was always gaslighted because we didn't have the internet, and I came late on the internet. I joined the 21st century just 2 years ago. I first got a computer phone, literally after I retired.
Yeah.
I read stuff, but then I found out about Chomsky and John Pilger. That's
Somebody else who doesn't get in the,
No, that's
the corporate media.
Sounds good.
I just want to make sure that we answered your question.
Yes,
I didn't need to
Yeah, I wanted to get
cut
to
her-
what you were
I'm
saying
sorry, I
about
didn't-
that. No. But
Okay.
the thing about, I think it's so
you
important
for
that you
that.
have
We're
this.
talking about different voices, at least you have them now.
Yeah.
Back then, you didn't have nothing.
Yeah,
So-
we have so much, and that's
we
kind
had
of.
parameters, and that was it, and everybody trusted Cronkite, you know?
Yeah, and to your point, that's sort of the difference between the two. There's generational gap that's sort of coming together now. Is that people under 40 don't care about CNN. They don't care about Fox News. Aside from it's something to laugh at. The reason they did so many numbers during the election is because we all leaned in to see what a joke the establishment was. It wasn't because we agreed. And I remember sitting there, and I would sit there and go, "Oh my God!" I'd be like, "Tyrell, they think people are watching because they like them." Right. And they're like, "Oh, those poor, bless their hearts. It's going to be a sad day when they realize that, no, it's like we do." And that's one of the things that I think our generation, younger generations, mine, whatever, and this sort of new feeling that we have, and people like this, is that you're not glued to a TV. You're not glued. You know the truth. A lot of us, like I had to dig through it, and you had to dig through it even more. But now we have so much information that it's the internet. It's like he said, all you need is the camera. All you need is a little bit of editing software. It's about the art that comes out of it, and your words and expression and the good things as much as the bad. And we have platforms that cost nothing to put them on. We don't need them. Nobody needs them.
It's a great point.
Yeah, well,
You don't need those platforms.
let-
I understand what you're saying, but we need truth.
And with that, being 50, I'll be 50 in October. I know. So I didn't think I'd live this long either. I remember a time before CNN. I remember a time before the smartphones. I remember,
Facebook.
I remember before Facebook and Snapchat and Twitter. I remember getting my news from the newspaper and sitting there reading and rotary phones and all that kind of stuff where information traveled slowly, very slowly, and we got so little of it. So there's now, because we have this fire hydrant of information that we're bombarded with every day, and it's coming from all kinds of sources, which is not a bad thing, because, like I said, I believe in telling the stories of everyday people, because those are the stories that honestly change the world. We were just talking about a story that we heard about from another online commentator, this wonderful lady who, and we also don't have a problem repping other people either. I see that in the online progressive community where there's all this ridiculous competition where people are tearing each other down and being mean and nasty. And first of all, I don't have time to do that because I have a full-time job and a husband and a dog. So I just don't have time to, but if somebody else is telling a story that we haven't gotten to yet, and it touches my life, we all won.
Yeah.
We all won.
Yeah.
I really believe that. So Yvette Carnell, her outlet is Breaking Brown. Coffee, Current Events, and Politics shares their stuff all the time. Like you said, Bruce Dixon and Ajambu Baraka's.
Glenn
now,
Ford.
Glenn Ford and Ajambu Baraka's effort. But Yvette Carnell picked up a story that was picked up by the Guardian newspaper of a small town of predominantly black poor community in Alabama where there was a hookworm outbreak. Hookworm. Most of you don't know what hookworm is, because hookworm has basically been eradicated because we have better sanitary conditions in this country, because we're not that poor anymore, or so we think. These people are so poor. These people are so poor that they can't afford a septic tank. If you have never lived in the country, you don't know what a septic tank is either, because most of you grew up on the city sewer, on the city pipes or whatever. Septic tank is where in rural communities your wastewater goes. Septic tank has to be dug to a certain depth. It has to be concrete lined. It has to be treated with chemicals because there's human waste in there. And it has to be built in such a way that it cannot leak because it's human waste and it's a contaminant. It's toxic. These people were so poor, the entire community was so poor, none of them could afford a septic tank, to have a septic tank. So they were digging what we call septic holes. And they would dig holes in their property and dump the waste into the holes. Well, we know what happens with toxic waste when you just put it in the ground, it leaks out. So their children were going outside playing on contaminated land. And the contamination from the human waste fed hookworms, and their children were, suffered a hookworm outbreak in 2017 in the United States of America. And it wasn't an American paper who picked this up. It was The Guardian. And nobody else even bothered to read this story because, and this is where I'm having a problem with the progressive online media world right now. Because now you have, like you said, Jordan, this kind of purist, this litmus test. You know, my news can't be from any establishment source. So you've got people in the progressive world who aren't ever watching CNN. You've got people in the progressive world who aren't ever reading The Independent. They're not ever reading The Washington Post. They're not ever reading anything that is corporate funded in any way. So Yvette Carnell from Breaking Ground was the only progressive, and I don't even know if she wants to call herself that, online commentator who reported on this story. And because she read The Guardian and said, "What the? Are we allowed to curse in here?"
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, good.
He's
Because
been
I have
doing
a hard
it.
time
Yeah.
not. Because I have
He's
a
been
hard
very,
time not doing that.
You missed that, but he had a long tirade of that.
I have a hard time not doing that.
Go ahead.
I hope our
Join the
pastor.
fr-
I hope our pastor just does not watch.
Look for
But
lawyers.
Yvette Carnell was the only one who looked at this and said, "What the fuck is this? How is this happening?" She does a show on it, and then she tweets the representative for the people in this district. And it's because she did this show that the representative responded back and saying, "I'm going to do something about it." Now, do you think these people never tried to reach out to their representative before Yvette Carnell?
Yeah.
Seriously, but poor people in this country have no voice. Nobody's going to listen to them, especially if you're poor and you're black, especially if you're poor and you're black in the South. That's just the truth.
Yeah.
But we have people in the online community who are missing out on advocating for hurting people because they refuse to ever read any source that is corrupted by corporate influence. And while I understand that it's dangerous to get all of our news from CNN because they do lie, by omission, they lie by commission, so does Fox News. Yeah, they all get it wrong. But guess what? We do too. We get it wrong too sometimes.
Yeah.
We've had to apologize for something that we read and didn't quite understand, and one of our followers, would send up a comment and saying, "Well, why would you have that perspective on it?" The one example, I posted something about Venezuela. Didn't do all of my due diligence on what was going on in Venezuela, and it looked like I was supporting the regime that the U.S. I really wasn't, but I didn't word my. We all do that. We all make mistakes. Yeah. So while I understand that not relying on the corporate media is dangerous, it is very dangerous because the corporate media has fed us so many lies about each other for so long that we're now with the inevitable result of how we've ignored many issues, race being one of them. That's partially been the job of the media. But we also shouldn't make the mistake of never referencing establishment media in getting some of our information, because sometimes buried in those sources are these kinds of stories that you're only going to find it in the Metro section of the Washington Post. Unless you read the Washington Post, you would never know that while people have been selling bottled water, like in the medians and on the side, on the sidewalks for years, and nobody ever has a problem. There were 4 or 5 black kids who were selling bottled water on the National Mall, and they were stopped arrested, handcuffed, sat on the ground on the National Mall for selling bottled water. Why? Because they were suspected of selling PCP, which is also called water on the street. If you never read the Washington Post, if the Washington Post is anathema to you because it's a Clinton shill outlet, you would never know that those kids were harassed that way. So we have to be very careful about how we consume media and what media we consume, but we also have to be really careful about what we avoid too. And why we're avoiding it.
Can I just add one thing? Real quick?
Okay, real quick.
Just to answer you, because you were saying about do we have to beat them? We already have. Yeah. I mean, the bottom line is the independent media is very aligned with Bernie. I don't mean that in terms of politics. I mean the structure. So Bernie was able to compete because real people got 3 or 4 less Venti Starbucks a year and donated whatever it was, $20, $27, this and that. So whether it's TYT, Democracy Now, RT, Intercept, whatever it is, it could be lower level than that. But if we make sacrifices, because I believe we are the media, then I believe you can compete. You're never going to compete with AT&T now wants to buy CNN or whatever. Yeah, right. But it doesn't matter because you're competing on ideas and authenticity. Yes. And by the way, advertisers, they're not all evil, but advertisers want young people. Yeah. That's why all these digital sites and even CNN are pivoting to video. We always hear pivoting to video because the advertisers don't want to advertise on CNN and these places anymore. They want to reach you and you. So, I think that we've already won. The only reason CNN and their ratings are okay right now is because they're putting a food fight with Trump on every day. Mm-hmm. But that's not going to last. That's a sugar high.
Question.
Okay, you've been very patient. No, wait, hold on. We have a couple other people.
Okay,
yeah, go ahead.
I kind of want to address the fake news side of this. Could we possibly be putting too much emphasis on the storytelling side? And I don't mean to disrespect you or put you down because that's a lot of your focus. Historically, news has always come from, fact-based. Reuters started putting dispatches from the Commonwealth back to London, and because of, Morse code and they were paying by the word, it was very fact-based reporting. And then when the telex came along, there was a little bit more emphasis on, the stories expanded. Now we've got video, multimedia, and the bandwidth increases. We can tell the whole story. Are we losing something by having that ability rather than going back to what the facts are?
I disagree with that because what you're talking about is like this older school traditional, like just tell the facts, this and that. That's not journalism. That's stenography. So what these people basically did is this side says this side says this. We're neutral journalists. You fucking figure it out.
Journalists that were providing that information back in their dispatches, and they were the ones that were being reported in the Times of London and places like that.
Establishing the truth.
Well,
establishing the truth.
I would say that context is something that's so important.
Yeah.
And part of that is because maybe, 100, 150 years ago, you could read a little thing in a story. You're living in a town in Montana in 1880, and you can read a little story and kind of get it. But it's not important to you. Now, those things that are happening on the other side of the world are monumentally and immediately important to us, and we need context. And I think that context and giving context is what has caused a lot of that concern that we're going away from facts. It's because context of what's going on is often left out when narrative becomes more important. And to me, that's what corporate media does. Their narrative is more important than context. Yeah. I'm a big context person. Yeah. I'm like, I know the story is only supposed to be 3 minutes long, but it's going to be 4.5 because I need to explain to people where this started from. Mm-hmm. And I would rather take a minute of their time and have somebody go, God, it's so boring, and understand and have the context than to just hear the facts and that kind of thing, or start telling people this is what this all means. I want to give people a history lesson when CNN wants to just give them a list of things.
Bias comes in. Because you're taking what was, essentially.
I think I'll put it like this. I agree with you in a sense that there is. I think that there's a need that could be filled by just having a line of who, what, why, where, just kind of being fed out. You know, but at the end of the day, there's still, it's still going to be hard to have context because, it's still going to be hard to do that because we're talking about a global community now, which means that the who, what, why, and where that's important to you might not be important to, someone in Australia or Myanmar or something, so I do believe, yes, there is kind of a lack of just general, like, one site you can go to that's like an explosion happened here, or, this happened here, this is what time it happened, this is how many people were happy. Hey, let's do that rather than casualties.
Right.
But you know what I mean? Like, there is a lack of that, and I think you'd probably have to do some digging to just find a steady news crawl.
And I think
kind
the
of what
thing
you're
is,
talking
when you
about.
say just the facts, ma'am, is that what happens with that is it's the facts that are important. And, 100 years ago, the facts that were important to white,
Who
very
decides?
rich
Who
imperialists.
decides?
So that's a little context. So I think those facts can be twisted even as much as anything else. And I think the more information you give people and the more context to what's going on and more perspectives, the better. Because we live in a global world. You can't get away from that.
Exactly. Yes, we do live in a global world.
Okay, we got
So
several
right
other
now we
people.
have a-
We got several other
Hey.
people. Yes, I don't think you've had a
another
chance.
practical question.
Yeah.
So there's been an enormous amount of coverage of Houston for obvious reasons. And one of the things I read was that they were deregulating for the oil companies. And so, and of course, that's going to disproportionately affect communities of color. And it's, I think it's horrible. How would you go about getting that kind of story out there?
I think for me, actually, me and my cameraman were talking about it, and he's like, man, we should go to Houston, we should go to Houston. My default setting is I want to go when the cameras are not there. Not that it's not important to be there during the hurricane, but the real shitstorm and the real injustice, I mean, talk to the people in New Orleans right now. Talk to the people in Flint 3 years later. So to me, the most important thing is somebody should have been there before that hurricane reporting on the laws that they were trying to pass this bill to basically give a blowjob, excuse my French, to insurance companies. Yeah, somebody should be in Flint reporting that they're putting tax liens on poisoned black people's homes and white people. So to me, the most important thing is I'm only one person. I can't be everywhere, but that's why it's so important. Like I said before, you go to your city council meeting. If you want to do journalism or if you want to donate to people doing that, I think it's very, very important that not just when something breaks. I remember at MSNBC, I used to fight with my manager. He's like, well, why are we going to go there? Nothing's going on there. That's the exact point. Let's go find out what's going on there.
Exactly.
That's what old school investigative reporting used to be before the corporations took over the media.
One of the problems that we do have today is that there's not a lot of money being poured into investigative journalism. So that's why it's kind of falling on you, the people, to do it and learn how to do it correctly yourselves. Because, in my position of doing this show, I have 28 minutes every day, Monday through Friday, to fit as much content as I can. I can't tell you a whole story even in that amount of time, because some stories are that big. But one thing that Tabitha and I rely on is trying to take in this world of news and then finding a story, like you're saying with Houston, and saying, ooh, this is something that I look up here and I look over here, no one's talking about. Okay, I need to get this particular story out there and do my part to reach the 700 million homes that probably not all of them are watching, but you hope that people are tuning in, the 700 million homes that I can, in the capacity that I can. So, that's why it's important for people out there to be sharing their community stories online, because eventually, like you were saying, they'll trickle up, and suddenly me and Tabitha could come across that story and say, oh, you know what, we're going to talk about this for 8 minutes, and it's going to reach 700 million homes around the world and get shared online, and then maybe something will be done about it. That's the hope that you have when you do the job.
Or it teaches someone in a similar situation that at least it shows them somebody's paying attention.
Yes.
Right.
Somebody's paying attention, and they might be able to do something in their own communities.
Right.
It gives people hope.
Yeah.
Question over here.
A little different question. So obviously, I know we have a struggle against corporate media, but I've noticed since the election, since Chariton race, there's been a green out amongst even progressive media sources.
There's been a what?
There's been a green out.
Okay.
nobody talking about the Green Party. I know the state parties have reached out to progressive outlets through Twitter, email. Myself, I personally reached out because there's some serious issues going on with serious elections this year that are major, and we have major issues that need to be addressed. And it just seems that amongst everybody, I wish Lee was here to talk about it too, but we personally reached out to numerous progressive journalists, and nobody's been covering the Green Party and what we're trying to accomplish. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but even here at this Convergence conference, up until the end of August, there was no Greens on the itinerary. There's no Green Party logo on the banner when you go in there. You know, you have everything else there. You pop up, take your photo on the wall, but the Greens weren't there. It was all last minute. I will give accolades and praise to Holly Seeliger. She went out of her way, posted about it, and it seems like all of a sudden people woke up and decided to address it. And all of a sudden Jill Stein's here. All of a sudden you have Darren Locke here. And I just want to know amongst you guys, it seems like there's a green out since the election, since Chariton. What's going on? Is there something that we don't see?
Well, I think partly that what I saw, because I went down and covered the Green Party convention in Houston last year, and the first day we were there was nobody. It was just us. And they only showed up on the last day, and then suddenly it was packed in all the major news. I was there the whole time. You were there the whole time. I was there the whole time. But they were just there to be like, well, to ask the snippy questions and to do their little thing. But they only care when they think there's going to be like, you know, something flashy or to make fun of somebody. I think the Greens do have a hard time getting any of the independent parties being taken seriously, and that's because of the two-party system and the corporate media, and that's why independent media, I think, is so important, because it's independent voters.
This whole thing, you have a whole section of burners that happen versus the Green Party that are trying to elevate this People's Party platform. What's to say the same thing isn't? Their voices aren't going to be.
I'll say this. One of the reasons, and this is kind of a little. And I say this to everybody who's got, I know we got other questions, so I'll be really fast, but I'll say this to everybody in this room. It's very important that when you're trying to put forth a new party or a new political ideology or get people, you have to always keep the tent as big as you can. When my father ran in '98 and won governor, he made it a point to say, I'm an independent. I'm going to accept. You're either going to believe in me or you're not. In the sense of like, I want to bring everybody together and try to listen to as many people as possible, because otherwise you're just going to hang out on an island and be alone. You have to understand everybody's concerns, because at the end of the day, if you're going to take a political message and say, we're going to win, we're going to start winning offices, we're going to start doing this, you have to understand that it's not just the people that got this person elected that then they're going to be governing over or they're going to be caring about. And so I think it's important that you don't leave out a Green Party opinion, you don't leave out a Libertarian opinion, you don't leave out any of these opinions, because ultimately, the way I look at the world is I try to take the best ideas from everywhere I can find. I don't try to isolate myself to just one ideology, and I think it's important.
So what are you doing right now to make that
I
happen?
also think.
Yeah, let's.
Go ahead.
Could we just make sure everybody who's asking questions?
Somebody
Yeah,
back
I'm
there.
sorry. Somebody back.
Answer, please.
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
I also think you're not going to like my answer. Sorry. I also think, not particularly focused on the Green Party, but activists either love me or hate me. I mean, I have 800 messages between my email and Facebook right now of whether it's activists, political organizations, kooks, pitching me stuff and wanting me to do stuff. And frankly, like, I'm not saying woe is me, but like my back's fucked up, I want to go to the bathroom, maybe date occasionally. So it's like, that's why it's so important. You can't depend on even independent media to be your megaphone, because there's, whether it be they're overwhelmed. I've never gotten from TYT, like, don't cover it. They sent me to the Green Party convention. I interviewed Jill Stein several times after the election, actually.
Green Party debates on our
right.
Yeah.
So
we have a huge gubernatorial election in New Jersey, where you have Goldman Sachs 2.0, corporate den that was anointed there, basically the nomination. They're the only progressive candidate, and nobody's covered.
But my point is, I have about 200 other people sending me messages just like that. So it's not to knock you, but like, you can't only depend on a few sources to cover your stuff, you're going to have to go out and get it out there yourself. It's frustrating on an activist level, I get it, but, you know.
So what's your determination on going after what you do?
Somebody else?
Is there any more questions? We want to make sure everybody's, okay, go ahead, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah,
I just wanted to ask two questions really quick.
Sure.
During this panel, I got an email from a Republican running for Congress in my district. We'll read like half a sentence. Sadly, Brad Schneider, who's the incumbent Democrat, is one of the most partisan politicians in D.C. He's toed the Nancy Pelosi party line, blah, blah, blah. None of the rest matters. In campaigning myself, I have been smeared with being with the Green Party. Like, I don't believe in Wi-Fi or vaccines, which is an easy 5-minute scientific explanation if anyone actually gave me the time to do it, and you would be on my side immediately. How do you break that hold, those smears, and how do I engage my local media and some of the bigger media organizations out in Chicago to cover me or want to cover me, because in reaching out to them, and I understand I'm young, I'm with the Green Party, no one knows who I am, so why would they want to talk to me? How do I do that? And then I actually wanted to ask you specifically, your father wrote a book which was basically all the opposition research that anyone could have done against him, more or less. Do you find, obviously he won the gubernatorial race, do you find that that's a good idea for a person to do, is to essentially put themselves in a position to paint their own narrative to the media, and when the media goes to report on them, if they want to make any, they have to twist your words and essentially lie about your past in order to frame the conversation in a way that puts you in a negative light?
Right. I think I'll answer the personal question first, because I think it does kind of play into, breaking, what you mentioned earlier too, the stigma that people have and all that. But I think it's very important, especially if you're thinking about running for office or being a public figure or putting yourself out there like that, that the first thing that if you represent a threat, plus it gets ratings, the first thing they will do is they will try to find anything in your past that you may or may not have done and use it against you.
So that's how you justify it?
So what like my dad did is, I don't know which book you're referring to, but what he did when he wrote his autobiography, he put all of his skeletons out in that autobiography, simply to say, this is all the things I've done. I'm not ashamed of them. I'm a human being. I'm flawed. Maybe there were right decisions at the time, maybe there were wrong decisions at the time, but this is all it is. What that does is it takes the teeth out of anyone then looking to tear you down. Because if you yourself are saying, look, I'm not the best person in the world, I've made some really horrendous mistakes in my life that I'm not proud of, where can they go with a story? Right. There's no story then. And so then, like you said, then they have to make up their own or twist or conflate or whatever. Well, then you have an edge on them, because then suddenly you can say, well, I know that's categorically false, and here's the witnesses.
You're like, no, it was much worse than what you said.
Some of the outfits in the ring were, but get that out, then they.
That feather boa, you're
that
not going to
boa,
hide from
that is a killer. Yeah.
Body sheen. But no, and I think that, look, any time that you take a stance, whether it's in journalism or in politics or in your belief system, you have to be prepared that people are going to attack you for it and ignore you for it. That's part of the that's part of the gig, And I've seen more slings and arrows, thrown at my co-star simply because she's a woman speaking her mind, than I've ever seen slung at me. When my family, was involved in politics, even to this day, we got 3 death threats a week, and we were trying to do good for as best we could, So at the end of the day, it's part of the gig. In terms of breaking, getting them to pay attention, it's hard. Every situation is kind of unique, but I would say the best thing you can do is try to think about. Put yourself in their position and say, okay, what do I have to do to get their attention in that sense? It might be, okay, they might ignore me, but maybe they won't ignore the story. Right. Or maybe they'll pay attention to me and that's why they're ignoring it. You kind of have to navigate that. I wish I could give you like a special cocktail that says, here, they'll listen to you.
Just don't let it get you down.
But do diligent. I would say be diligent, be vigilant. Just keep knocking on the door. Eventually they'll listen.
I'm sorry. In 1954, W.E.B. Du Bois wrote an essay for The Nation magazine called "Why I Won't Vote."
Yeah.
And this was W.E.B. Du Bois. If you don't know who he is, I'm not going to tell you. Go look it up.
That's sad.
And he explained that over the course of his voting life, he had voted in, I guess it was 8 elections, at the presidential elections at that point. He voted for Republicans, he voted for Democrats, he tried to vote for third-party candidates. And I encourage you to read the article. It is still published, still available in The Nation magazine. It's an amazing, prescient look at today's politics. Because what he said about the way third parties were treated in 1954 is exactly what your concern is. It's exactly what your concern is. And it's exactly what our concern is and why we exist on any level in this online media outlet. W.E.B. Du Bois said that. Yeah, he said that for black people, look, the Republicans have screwed us over, they've lied to us, they've given us lip service, they've screwed us over. The Democrats have screwed us over, they've lied to us, they've screwed us over. We'd love to vote for third-party candidates, but the two-party system won't let us get information about them so that we know that we have a choice. This was in 1954.
Yep.
Nothing has changed. The fight is the same to educate the voting populace. So your job is really to do whatever it takes to fight that system and to circumvent it. How do you do that? Okay, you don't have a TYT level outlet. That's fine. You got 2 feet.
Mm-hmm.
You got 2 feet and a hand that can knock on some doors.
A whole lot of education experience.
And a whole lot of education experience, and you know the people you want to reach out to vote for you, so then you go talk to them.
Yeah.
The same thing with you. I don't want to call you Green Party guys.
These Green Parties awesome.
But it's the same, especially in Chicago. No, you're in Chicago. Do you know Comey Parrott?
No.
I need to hook you up.
I'm suburbs.
Okay. That's okay. We don't need to. But it's
in New Jersey.
But you need to talk to him.
What's wrong with
But it's the same. But it's the same thing. We are so spoiled by technology now. We want everything to be on our phones and online but when Eugene Debs was organizing the labor workers, what did he do? He went to the houses of the company of the miners. He went to their houses and he sat down and he talked to them and he asked them, so how is the company screwing you over?
Yeah.
Let me tell you what I think we can do to fix that, change that. This means that we may not see a victory for third parties in the next election. That's not only entirely possible, that's probable. But that's on a national level. Yeah. We can absolutely get some victories on a local level. We can get some Green Party people on some school boards.
Oh, yeah.
Go talk to some parents.
In New Jersey alone, we have a gubernatorial race. We have 3 state assemblymen,
Mm-hmm.
a state senate race, 2 freeholders, school board. That's our strongest ticket ever.
And you go out.
But we can't get anybody to help, even just to do a 5-10 minute Skype interview.
So stop waiting for people to do a Skype interview and go face to face with and
Patterson's 4th Ward 4 times.
And I'll give you my card and we will interview you. This is how it's done. But then the other thing, I know we're over time, and I'm sorry, I'm late, but I'm just, But the other thing that I think is key to this online media thing, and you mentioned it, British guy back there. Yeah.
Just the fact.
Yes. I should have said just the facts guy.
British guy.
You mentioned something very important, which I think is the fake news aspect.
Yeah. Boy.
It's a whole nother panel.
No, but
It's
go
a
with it.
whole-
We gotta
look,
cover. Do some covering.
We're not. I tend to look at things from a smaller level. I understand that national politics affects all of us at the same time. I get that, and it's very, very important. But your school board elections happen more frequently than your president is elected. Your city council elections happen more frequently than your president election. We got to deal with Donald Trump for the next 4, it will probably be 8, I'm so sorry
Stop
to tell
it.
you, years.
No, you're not.
I'm sorry, but
can't be-
He's right.
no, it's funny. I
be
just have
wrong.
to say that the night of the election, we were watching CNN. Sitting there, and we were, that is really hilarious. They are, and at first they can't believe that this is impossible. And as the night wore on, we just became hysterical because we realized that these people were actually terrified that Donald Trump had just won. And every black person we knew, like 3 weeks before, was like, we're going to have President Trump. You know? And we're just like, so we did this live stream. It's up on our page where I'm in his pajama top and we're sitting in bed and we are laughing hysterically.
Oh my
At
goodness.
not at the outcome of the election, but at the cluelessness of the people who were reporting on the outcome of the
John and
election.
Oprah.
Exactly. That's how out of touch they are.
I have a question
But
for you.
on the subject of fake news, right?
Yeah.
The entire election coverage was one big fake news circle jerk for me, for us.
Everybody.
But what is also happening in the progressive online community right now is another kind of fake news, where we're being educated by memes. And I gotta tell you, it is the most, I can't remember who it was who said that an educated voting populace is the most dangerous weapon against tyranny, but that's true.
It is.
It is absolutely true. That's why the media has always been slanted, because we are never supposed to really know what they were up to. And if progressives believe that the same thing is not being done to them on their own outlets, we're stupid.
Yes.
Because the same people who are who manufacture consent through mainstream media, they're some of the same people who are manufacturing dissent and what's the other word I'm looking for? Dismissal in online progressive spaces. And I'm going to give you this one example, and I'm going to shut up. Charlottesville, the horrible racist terrorist attack that happened in Charlottesville. Now, as much as we're all here because of online media, there has been a narrative that has been passed around in online media that Charlottesville is a fake false flag, manufactured George Soros-backed event that wasn't real, and it's just a distraction that Soros and the elite are using to distract us from health care.
Yeah, we're all waiting for
And,
a check still.
and I know that for most of you in here, that sounds absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
I know that sounds ridiculous. But if I told you how many people online actually believe that, you would understand how dangerous this kind of fake news is. See, the national fake news manufactures consent on a level where you've got an entire population of people believing that someone who profited off of mass incarceration is a good idea for somebody to have as a president. But this kind of fake news is the kind of thing that kills movements.
Yeah.
It's the kind of propaganda that the FBI used with COINTELPRO to destroy the Black Panthers, to destroy the American Indian movement,
100%.
to destroy every leftist organization. So we've got to be careful with that too.
Thanks for a terrific panel. Thank you, guys. And thank you. I hope everybody got their questions in. Thank you really a lot.
Ended on Black Panther.
We should get together in New York.
Listen, do you have a card? I know,
I don't.
but you have your 800. Here, I'd love to have you on the show.
Sure.
This is the email.
Great.
I do the
I'll shoot you a
radical
message.
message.
Yeah, absolutely. You said you teach at John Jay?
Yeah, I'm also have exposed that I'm doing a file, whatever it is, with a friend of mine.
Oh, cool.
So we're doing a lot of stuff.
Great.
And I was doing, yeah.
I'll reach out
Listen,
to you.
please get in touch with me. Okay.
Absolutely.
And when we get, you live in.
I'm on the Upper East Side now.
Okay. Well.
Not in the swanky part.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right, man.
Great.
Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too.
Really just.
Everybody has
Don't run away. Wait, you work for us.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
It's all like that.
Show, I think it's, you said I heard, oh, you know, someone else.
TYT guys.
Yeah, I mean, my husband is from New Jersey, so
Okay, what's your first name? Tyrell. Yeah, that was incredible when you popped in. Establish you kind of looked at me, kind of like they looked at Trump. He has no chance. Well, it's true. Now I hear you pop the Fuse the Flag commercial because of how they
I'm so sorry that I was late. He's like, shut up!
I'm just glad you
I don't want to shut up, okay?
showed you. Hey, Chicago.
He was kicking in too.
Yeah. Do you know he acted this up there in Minnesota?
I did.
Do you know any personally ever talked to him?
I mean,
You may like this too. So you ever had a meeting of say 12 to 20 people? I had tabletops that I bring and they're hinged. And you just pull it up and you go here. So everyone can be in the meeting and they all be in the first row. And I build all these tables, no cost to you other than the local source lumber. I'm an IT guy making $100 grand a year. So I just want to do stuff on weekends because it's not IT. You get me? I'll come to Minnesota.
Fantastic. She's much better on That was wonderful. Do you have a card or something where I can follow up to your show?
I don't. I actually don't. I don't have any cards, but
You're together, right? You're on the same show?
yeah, so
I
Washington,
might
we go on
not be,
Arts
right?
Week.
What are the other things that I'm going to miss? I don't know. Watching is something to tell you about.
If you look up my name,
Okay.
you can take that.
I will.
If you look up my name online, you can go to my Twitter and the link to the YouTube channel and everything.
Oh, okay.
And then
I have one of these, so okay.
yeah.
So this time today, watching the hockey.
I
Okay,
know.
you were great. Thank you so much.
Thank you
You
so
were great
much.
too.
Great. I just want to say thank you and I love the show. I was late and I love the show. I know other people want to talk, so I'm
Great
getting out
question,
here.
by the way.
Thank
No,
you.
I really-
It was great.
Yeah. It's one of those funny things that
Thanks for coming late.
is a
Because you're never late. Thanks, I love your passion. Before you
player is one thing that might actually.
That's what I'm saying.
Oh, I see that. I have like 5 minutes late.
I had to figure out what to say. One thing I want to take was the other one of my suitcase, so we know which one to use.
Awesome!
I make tabletops. That was kind of fun. Everyone's in the front row.
I will contact you.
Yeah, and I'll put it on for 35 people. And I had a model that
I saw it.
I'm working on a model. I'm going to show you my model tomorrow.
All right, thank you.
Where is it? You keep your tiny hands off my...
Thank you.
Oh, that's got to be because of Trump.
No, I'm not.
My bag.
I don't know.
Here's the deal. Here's the schedule.
There's no